Matrix, and welcome to Matrix Exam Guide. Today we're doing Maths Paper 2. My name is Looney and I'll be assisting you to get all your questions through to us. All you need to do is follow us on our social media pages, Matrix, and hit us up on our WhatsApp line. There's so many competitions going on, guys, so please stay tuned to get more details. As always, I am never alone. With me are Sia and our sign language interpreter, Keta. Thank you so much, guys. Over to you.
All right. Welcome, guys. Thank you, Looney, for that. As Looney said, we are doing some exam guide on paper 2. So let's just jump right into it. So what does the paper look like? We know that the paper always carries 150 marks. So approximately you have a minute for each and every mark that you have, or over a minute. And you have 3 hours to complete the 150 marks in terms of the question paper. As there's generally 10 questions, it might be 11, but mostly it's like 10 questions that we deal with there. You need to please answer all the questions in the question paper. And then also there is instructions and there is an information page that you need to look at. You need to read and follow the instructions carefully. Now, one of the instructions that most of us do not follow, especially with paper 2, is when they say round off to 2 decimal places. You know, on the instruction, it says you need to round off to 2 decimal places unless told otherwise. So please note that and then follow it accordingly as a belief. And then you must number all your answers exactly as they are numbered. So if there is an error and there's 2.1s, you write 2.1 twice. And then show all your working because that's where your marks are. And then also the very first question that we deal with, which are the first 2 questions, it's statistics, which is 20 plus or minus 3 marks. And then here you need to be determining the least squares regression line, the correlation coefficient. So the very first 2 concepts, guys, they are mainly on your calculator. You know you don't do this manually. You need to be pressing your calculator in order to do this. So you know it's your mode setup. You choose number 2. If maybe you're using the gray calculator, if you're using the silver one, you choose number 3, and you opt for A plus BX, which shows the least regression line. So please remember how to do that. And then also there is what we call the modal class. Modal class, the word modal means we're talking about a mode, so the most frequent number. So when we say now modal class, we're talking about the class that has the highest frequency. And then lastly, it's the concept of cumulative frequency, which assists us in drawing our ogive. And then question 3 and 4 will be analytical geometry. So with analytical geometry, guys, there's always 2 questions of analytical geometry. The first one is your grade 11 analytical. The second question is your grade 12 analytical. Grade 11 will be your distance, midpoint, gradient, equation of a line, angle of inclination. Those are the things you need to know them. With the second question of analytical geometry is mostly circle analytical geometry. So you're finding your equation of a circle, you're finding the center of a circle, you're finding the radius of the circle. So those are the 2 questions that you're always going to have. And they range between 40 plus minus 3 marks. Now, as I said, you will need to know how to calculate the equation of a line and a tangent, and also that of a circle, and then use the gradient to find angle of inclination. Lastly, use the distance to find coordinates of a point. Then our question 5 and question 6 will be trigonometry, which is mostly 30 plus or minus 3 marks. Specifically here, I'm talking about the theory of geometry. That's what we're talking about here. So your reduction formulae, your identities, and all of those. So you need to know how to simplify expressions without using a calculator. Now I know you think we are not with you in the exam room, which is very true, but trust me, we can see when you use your calculator when you are solving your questions. So please do yourself a favor, don't look at the calculator when they say without the use of a calculator. But you can always try to, maybe if you are given 210, you can play around your calculator to find the actual reduction formulae, but not to solve the actual question, please. And then also, you need to know your general solution. So general solution, the most important thing here is what we call the reference angle, please. So you need to remember that. That's the very most important thing. And then the range of a tree graph. When you talk about range, remember we're talking about the y values. Then lastly, the points on a graph. So points on a graph, we're talking about your amplitude, we're talking about your maximum and your minimum. You can see them on the graph. So that's what I'm really talking about there. And then our question 7 is also trigonometry, but now it's our application of trigonometry. Now application, we're talking about both 2D and 3D. That's mainly where we apply our trigonometry. So we use the ratios to express lengths in terms of x. Guys, I know when they say in terms of x, they do not mean you need to solve for x. It simply means that your answer should have x as one of the variables that are there. It might have other variables, but as long as there is x in your answer, then you have answered the question correctly. Don't solve for x, because that's not what the question would want you to do there. And then the other important thing is we only use the ratios if we are given a right-angled triangle. So that's one of the other things you need to please remember there. And then with the rules I'm talking about, remember there's 3 rules that we look at. It's our sine rule, our cosine rule, and our area rule. So those are the rules we're talking about. You use them to find angles, and you also use them to find an area of a triangle. So remember, if you want to find angles, you can use either your sine rule or your cosine rule, depending on what you are given. So you always need to write down the given information in order to decide which rule to use between the two. The last one is area of the triangle. Only if the triangle is a non-right-angled triangle, then you can use the area rule. But if it's a right-angled, you know it's half base times height. And then also our question 8 to 10 will be Euclidean geometry and measurement. Now, I know Euclidean geometry seems to be the most difficult question, but I've seen a lot of you guys do so well in that particular question. The diagnostic report has also indicated that you guys are now mastering your Euclidean geometry, so keep up the good work. The main thing that you need to know is I need reasons. When you're writing down what you are thinking, you need to indicate why that is the case. So you can't say angle 1 is equals to angle 2 without telling me why that is the case. So you need to always make sure that you write your statement and your reason. So please also go over that. Also, you need to know that you need to prove equal angles and equal sides. Remember that to find equal angles, it means the sides that those angles are opposite to must be equal. Similarly with, if I want to find the sides, I must make sure that the angles that they are opposite to are equal, or the sides subtend equal angles on the circumference of the circle. And then the last concept is the grade 12 Euclidean geometry, which is proportionality. We use this to talk about similarity and to prove ratios. There is a difference, grade 12s, between similarity and congruency. Remember, similarity is things that are in proportion, whereas congruency is things that are exactly the same. So those are things that you please need to make sure that you are aware of. Right, guys, that's all from me. I will hand over to Looney, and I will see you just after the break.
All right, thank you, Sia. Guys, let's take a quick break, and we'll see you straight after these. Welcome back from the break, guys. Thank you so much for joining us. If you've just tuned in, we are still doing your exam guide in preps for your upcoming exams. If you're someone who's constantly running out of data, then this next competition is definitely for you. Matrix is bringing you #WazzoWinner competition, where 2 matrics stand a chance to win 2 gigs of data. So what are you waiting for, guys? Hop on over to our Facebook page and enter the competition. Not more time wasted, let's go straight to Sia.
All right, welcome back, guys, from the ad break. So right now I'm going to be looking at some tips for solving equations that are in trigonometry, and also just tips in preparation for paper 2. I know that we all study differently, we all practice differently, but these are just general things that we want you to please pay attention to in preparation for your exam and in solving certain questions under the paper 2. Now let's look at it. So the very first tip that we are saying is, when you're preparing for your paper 2, practice the skills that you learned in earlier grades. What do I mean? Using a calculator in stats mode. I think I spoke about this when we were talking about statistics and the least regression line. You need to know how to use your calculator in stats mode. And one thing for sure I should caution you is, please refrain from using the on button when you want to clear the screen. Always use the AC, which means all clear. So if you are in stats mode, don't touch the on button. Just always use the all clear button if you want to clear your screen and you want to do something on the screen, please. And then also, you need to learn how to substitute into the formula and also writing geometric proofs. When I'm talking about substituting into the formula, if you are using maybe a sine rule formula, make sure you indicate what the angle A is and what the angle B is, what the side A is and what the side B is, in order for you, when you're substituting, you can then substitute the correct values, please. So don't just go straight to the formula and want to substitute. No, write down what those values are and then substitute accordingly, please. And then also, when you're preparing for paper 2, make sure that you revise and learn facts about each topic. Now, when I'm talking about each topic, I'm saying make summary notes, guys, especially of theorems. Most of you get these questions incorrect, where they say complete the following statement. Remember, if they say complete the following statement, it simply means that's a theorem that you need to make sure that you understand in order to apply it. And one of the things I need to also tell you is, most of the time when the first question says complete a statement, it means the subsequent questions are going to use that theorem that you actually completed there. So please pay attention to that. Make note of all your theorems. Try to understand what they are all about. Look at the links between the theorems. Don't cram them. No. Understand the links so that even when it is not shown in the way that you are used to, you can still see the link and understand what they are asking you. And then also, familiarize yourself with the formula sheet. I can't stress this enough. Paper 2, a formula sheet is your friend. Why? Because most of the double angles and the compound angles, they are there in your information sheet. So you don't necessarily need to spend so much time trying to memorize that cos of A plus B is equals to what. No, you don't need to do that. You just need to know how to apply it and when to apply it. And then always use your formula sheet. Remember, as you get to the exam, detach the information sheet, put it on the side, and work with it there, because you don't want to always go back to the end of the question paper in order to see the formulas that are given. So detach it, put it on the side, and work with it. But remember, you need to leave everything in the exam room when you leave the venue. So you're not taking anything with you when you leave the exam room, except for your stationery and your timetable, for that matter. And also, remember to break up the sections into manageable parts using links between those parts. Use colors and highlighters to group similar ideas. highlighters and colors, they come in handy, especially when you are doing Euclidean geometry, because you need to show that the red means all those angles are equal, and then maybe on the red you then add a blue. The blue would mean it's now equal to that because of a certain property. So you see, that's where your colors comes in. So please try and invest in at least 3 different colors that you can use in an exam situation and also while preparing for your exam. And then when you're also preparing for paper 2, talk to another grade 12 learner. Remember, it doesn't need to be an actual friend that you have, because some of us have friends that are not in grade 12. So just talk to somebody that is doing maths and explain certain concepts that you understand and certain questions that you understand. Remember, one example that I can make is with a song. For you to understand a song, you always need to sing along with the song in the background until you understand it and you know the lyrics. But as you are busy practicing the song, wherever you don't know, you always hum the song. But as soon as you know it, you can sing from word to word until you are done. Similarly with this, the more you talk about maths, the more you will understand what you are doing. The more you explain how you got to an answer, the more you will understand how to go about solving a certain question. Please stop saying, I'm shy, I can't talk to anybody. You definitely can explain yourself, especially if you understand what you are talking about. So please make sure that you talk to someone. Even if it's not somebody who is doing maths at school, you can talk to your family. Just say, can I explain something? I understand this. And go about explaining it so that you can talk more about it, which in turn will make you understand it way, way better. And then also apply what you have learned by doing past papers. Go over a lot of past papers and apply what you have learned. And then the last thing would be plan how you're going to answer the question paper in order to boost your confidence. Guys, there is no need for you to start with question 1, 2, 3, etc., etc. You can start with question 12 and go to question 2 and go to question 8. But what you need to do there, remember I said, you need to number them according to how the question paper has numbered them. So you start each question on a new page. If you start with 12, make sure you answer the whole of question 12. You go to question 2, answer the whole of question 2. Question 8, you answer the whole of question 8. So what this means is you start with the questions that you can easily understand and you can answer easily. So it's a variation with a lot of us, but stats, you normally can understand that. So just do your stats, get it out of the way. Analytical geometry, especially the grade 11 one, most of us can do that. Go to analytical geometry, answer it. Trigonometry, also go to the questions that you understand better, do the question, answer it, and complete it. And then go to the questions that maybe you do not understand better. Remember that one thing that plays against you is your confidence when answering the questions. Guys, you know how nice it is when you get things right. So start with the things you can get right so that you have motivation to go do the things that are a bit challenging for you. Now, we're going to look at a concept that we found to be a problem over the years from the past papers, and that was trigonometric expressions, equations, and identities. Guys, remember, when we talk about identities, we're not only talking about sine squared theta plus cos squared theta is equals to 1, or tan theta is equals to sine theta over cos theta. No. Even the grade 12 identities, you please need to know them and know how to apply them. That is your double angles and your compound angles. But remember, you don't need to cram them. You just need to know how to apply them and when to apply them, because they will be given to you in the information sheet, which I said needs to be your friend when you are practicing and when you get to the exam. Now, let's just look at this. You need to revise the definitions of the ratios for triangles and the Cartesian plane. The two triangles will be when it is a right-angled triangle, So when it's a right-angled triangle and when it is a non-right-angled triangle. You know that with a right-angled triangle, I can use my ratios, I can use the theorem of Pythagoras. With the non-right-angled triangles, I use the rules like your area rule, sine rule, and cosine rule. Also use your reduction formulae and identities to simplify expressions. I think most of us, we know this thing here where they say cast, meaning cos is only positive in the fourth quadrant, all ratios are positive in the first quadrant, sine is positive in the second quadrant, and tan is positive in the third quadrant. So make sure that you locate the reduction formulae according to the Cartesian planes and according to the cast diagram in order for it to make sense, please. And then also make sure that you know how to solve trig equations, including the general solution. Remember I said reference angle is our most important thing under general solutions. And then with identities, now I just explained right now that when you talk about identities, it's not only your grade 11 identities, even your grade 12 identities, they come in handy. What am I talking about? You need to know how to manipulate. If maybe you have sine as the dominant ratio, it means you need to try and change the cos, but you need to make sure that it's cos squared theta in order for you to use an identity. So those are just few examples that I can throw out there for you to please remember, especially when solving identities. And then we're going to look at a specific question now where I'm going to try and explain these concepts that I've just mentioned. So they want us to simplify. Simplify, let's understand what that means first. Simplify means we don't want to see tan. So tan theta or tan x. You don't want to see that as your final answer. Unless your final answer is sine over cos, then you leave it as tan. But while solving, tan must be done away with using the identities. That's what simplify means. Also, simplify means if you are given angles, reduce the angles such that they are all smaller than 90 degrees, meaning they are your special angles. So those are the things that we mean when we say simplify. Let's look at this and actually make sense of what I mean. So here I'm given sine x over cos x multiplied by tan x. There's going to be two ways of doing this, right? The very first way will be if you separate the two things, right? So you would need to separate the two. Separate the two, it means I have sine of x over cos of x multiplied by 1 over tan of x. And then this will lead to tan x over 1 multiplied by 1 over tan x. And then automatically you can see that this is actually going to be equal to 1 because the tan x and the tan x are going to divide each other. Or one other way would be if you first change the tan x to be equals to sine x over your cos x. So what do I mean? This is going to be sine x over cos x multiplied by sine x over cos x. And then you can already see there from that question that the cos and the cos by the denominator will divide and you'll be left with sine over sine, which automatically is 1. If you solve that, because if you divide something that is exactly the same as what you are dividing by, your answer is always 1. And please stay away from using the language it cancels out, because most of you, when you say cancel out, your answer becomes 0 and not 1, because mentally, you know, when something cancels out with something, there is nothing left there. So just try and use the correct language, divide and not really cancel. Now, let's apply this into a more bigger question. So it says, simplify the following expression into one trigonometric term. Your trigonometric term can be sine, can be cos, or it can be tan. Now, you know that from the previous question that we did, we got that as 1. So I don't really need to be looking at that because we already know that that is equal to 1. And this will be plus. Now, firstly, I look at what 180 degrees plus means. It means that we are dealing with from 180 going to the third quadrant. So we are locating the sign in the third quadrant. What do I know there? Sign is negative in the third quadrant. And therefore that makes it negative sign x. Multiply by 90 minus is in the first quadrant. Remember, all of them are positive, so my answer will be a positive. But because of the 90 plus or minus, the ratio will change to its co-function. So let's just remind ourselves. The co-function of sine is cos, the co-function of cos is sine, and the co-function of tan is cot. But we hardly give you the co-function of tan because we don't do cot when we get to grade 12. So this means this will actually be sine of x. And therefore, this will then be equal to 1 minus sine squared x. And this becomes cos squared x as our answer. And then that's about it, guys, for the first segment. I hope that clears out a few things that you need to look at, especially with expressions, equations, and your graphs. I will see you guys after the ad break, and we'll hand over to Luni just now. I will see you just now.
Thank you so much, Sia. Guys, we are going to take a break, but don't forget to hit us up on all our socials, Was the Matrix, and on the WhatsApp line. If you have any questions, send them through and we'll assist you. We'll see you shortly after the break. Welcome back, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. Don't forget to enter the hashtag WazzoWinner competition, where 2 matrix stand a chance to win 2 gigs of data. We've got a WhatsApp question, so let's check that out.
Could you please go through a question on trig graphs? All right, matrix. So the question is about trig graphs, and they want us to look at a trig graph. Now, with trig graphs, there's just a few important things that I need to mention there. One, you need to know things about your amplitude, because that makes you know how to determine your range for that function. Also, the restriction that you are given, which will always be our domain because it's always given to us. Also, how to interpret the graph. And then lastly, you need to know how to look at lengths when they ask you to find a length on that particular graph. So those are just the few pointers that you need to look at. But in specific, let's just look at a specific question from past papers. So before we do that, you need to make sure that you recognize the different shapes of the trig function. Also, don't forget terms used to describe the functions such as your domain and your range. And then lastly, understand how different parameters change the shape of a trigonometric function. What do we mean? If they say it is shifted 1 unit up, what does that mean? What does that change? You need to know those things. If it is shifted 30 units to the right or to the left, what does that mean? What does it change? What stays the same and what changes? So those are the things that we really mean that you need to look out for. And then, now an actual question from a past papers reads as follows. In the diagram, the graphs of f of x, that's important, and also g of x, that's also important, are drawn for the interval. The interval is also very important. And then the graphs f and g, they intersect at A. So remember, guys, if the graphs are intersecting, what does that mean? It means at that point, the graphs are exactly the same. So you equate them to one another and then solve. So that's what the intersection really, really means there. And then the last point they gave us was B there, which is 360 degrees and -1. Now, the first question wants us to talk about the range of f. Now, f, if we just go back to the question, it was sine x minus 1, right? So I'm just going to write it here. Our f of x is equals to sine x minus 1. Now let's understand what this means, guys. This means that the graph of f, which was the original graph, sine of x, was shifted 1 unit down. What does that mean? It means the amplitude of the graph changes, because now it is no longer going to be between minus 1 and 1. But it is going to move from being the maximum at 1 and being the maximum at 0. And the minimum moving from minus 1 being at minus 2. So in simple terms, it means that from here up until there, you are actually moving 2 units, right? Because that's the amplitude. Therefore, our range will be y is an element of my square bracket, because those values are inclusive there, minus 2 up until positive 0. But you know that 0 can never be negative. Some people don't prefer to write it like this. Some people prefer to say y is less or equal to 0, but greater than or equal to minus 2. It's an either-or situation. You can write it as one of the two solutions. They are very much correct, please. So that's what you need to know about the range. How does the range change? It changes when you move the graph and you shift it up or down. So if you translate the graph up or down, the range changes because the amplitude is consequently changed. The following question says, write down the values of x in the interval, that interval there for which the graph is decreasing. Now let's first talk about what does it mean for a graph to decrease. For a graph to decrease, it means that as the values of x are increasing, the values of y are decreasing. Because a graph to increase or decrease, we look at the y value. For it to increase, it means as the x values are increasing, the y values are also increasing. So those are the two differences. Now let's look at this one in specific. Now from this point to that point, you can see that moving from left to right, the x values are increasing, but the y values are also increasing. So this section does not hold. From 90 up until 270 there, you can see that moving from left to right, the x values are increasing and the y values are decreasing. So this section will hold for us. And then lastly, from 270 up until 360, as the x values are increasing, the y values are also increasing. So that does not hold. So that means for you to write the solution, it will be x is between the 270 degrees and the 90 degrees. You can write it like this, or you can include the equal to value there because they didn't really mention much about that. So it's either you say x is less than 270 and greater than 90, or x is less or equal to 270 and greater than 90. Or you can just use the interval of brackets there, your round brackets or your square brackets. So please note the two differences. Then let's look at the last question now. It says P and Q are points on graphs G and F respectively. Now I know that we think the word respectively is just an English word, but that's not true. Respectively means what I started with in terms of being P, it goes with what I started with in terms of your graphs. So they said P and Q, and they said G and F, meaning P goes with G and Q goes with F. So that's what the respectively really means there. Let's read the last part of the question. Such that our PQ is parallel to the y-axis. Then they say if our PQ lies between A and B. Now this is my A, that is my B. Meaning my P and Q will be between here. It will be somewhere here. So I'm just scribbling around to show you exactly where it will lie. Nothing on the left-hand side of A and nothing on the right-hand side of B. All right, so guys, that's all that the question is all about. Let's actually do what the question wants us to do. Now, remember they said that on G and F respectively, where they started with P and they went to Q. So what this means is our F is there by G and our Q is there by F, please. So you need to note that the respectively is not just an English word. I know we think it's just a language that is being used, but respectively means the order that we started with is the same order that you're going to continue with. So I said P and Q, and then I said G and F respectively. So P goes with G, Q goes with F. So that's what you need to please also be making sure that you understand. So if I was to draw an example of this, it can be PQ there. It can also be PQ there. It can also be PQ there. Now, one person might be asking, why is it that he's drawing so many lines? They said it is between A and B. So it doesn't matter where it is between A and B. Just not from the left-hand side of A and from the right-hand side of B. We're not looking at that. We're only looking at between A and B. So you can try and draw any line there as long as it is parallel to the y-axis. Now, they want the length. The length we know, a vertical length parallel to the y-axis is always the y at the top minus the y at the bottom. So let's have a look at that. So I will say my PQ is actually y at the top minus y at the bottom. Now at the top it's at P there. So that's what? G of x. So that's going to be G of x minus f of x there. And then I can work around that. So my G of x, as you remember, was our cos 2x minus my f of x was sine x minus 1. And then the cos 2x is a double angle. How do you change it? Now, there's three of them. A lot of us, we are always normally confused as to which one to use. What I can give you as advice is you use the one that is dominant on the question that you have. So you can see here that sine will be the dominant ratio, meaning you can change the double angle to be sine instead of cos or the sine and the cos. Therefore, this will be equals to, if I change this, it will be 1 minus 2 sine squared x minus sine x plus 1, right? So I'm just going to go to the next slide and have more space to do this. So this is actually going to be minus 2 sine squared x minus sine x plus 2, right? And remember, that's still our PQ there. But we still need to go back and see what exactly did they want us to do. So they said we need the values of x such that PQ will be a maximum. Now, I know that most of you will be thinking finding the derivative if it's a maximum and a minimum, but that's not the case. Maximum and minimum, remember also we are talking about the turning point there. So, and this is a quadratic equation. So you can say, if you don't know how to factorize this, you can say let my sine of x to be equal to k and work around it like that. But in this instance, you don't really need to do that. Instead, they want the turning point, meaning the axis of symmetry. So I'm just going to call it the AOS, right? Axis of symmetry. So axis of symmetry, remember, it will be sine x is equals to minus b over 2a. And then my b there is a -1, so it's minus into -1. My a is -2, so it's 2 into -2. And I will then be at sine of x is equals to minus 1 over 4. All right, so I believe there that you will then be able to do that. You just find your reference angle, and then since it's negative, it's by 180 degrees plus and 360 degrees minus. So please make sure that you understand that. I hope I've answered your question that you said we should try and look at a equation under trig graphs. Now, the most important thing now that I will leave with you is please don't forget to post your questions on our social media platforms. Looney told you about wonderful things that we are having in our platform, competitions and all of that. So who knows? If you send in your questions, then you might be that one person. But please make sure that you send those questions in all our media platforms. That is WhatsApp or our Facebook page. And also, you need to sleep early the night before your math exam. And then lastly, you need to exercise while studying. When taking breaks, just run around the house or the yard, or just do like 10 push-ups so that your blood can keep running and also you can be energetic while doing. Because most of you complain about exhaustion while you're studying. That's because you're eating a lot of junk while studying and you are not exercising or anything like that. So eat your fruits, drink water, and exercise a bit while studying. Guys, that's all from me. I will see you guys next time. Over to you, Looney.
Thank you so much, Sia, and thank you, Matrix, for tuning in to yet another amazing show. A big congrats to all the winners that will be announced on the Was the Matrix Facebook page straight after the show. We will be back with some more revision on your #1 educational channel. But from me, Looney, Sia, and Keta, it's a thank you and goodbye.